What happens to the dead soldiers on the Ukrainian battlefield? It's a question few dare to ask, and the answers are as grim as they are surprising. In this video, we uncover the untold story of what really happens to those who fall on both sides of the war. From the haunting remains left behind in the chaos of battle to the brave efforts of a volunteer group called the Black Tulip, who risk everything to retrieve the bodies, sometimes while bullets fly overhead. But that's just the beginning. What does it mean to find and bury the dead in a war where even the corpses might be booby-trapped? And why are Russian soldiers often abandoned on the battlefield, left to decay as if forgotten by their country? Stick with us as we dive deep into the eerie realities of death in war. The answers may surprise you and raise even more unsettling questions. In December 2023, the German YouTube channel Crisis released a video in which it filmed members of the Black Tulip in action. The video noted that both Ukraine and Russia often leave their dead soldiers behind on the battlefield in an action usually born out of necessity. Collecting your dead comrades isn't a priority when Russian bombs are raining down or Ukrainian drones are destroying your platoon. In many cases, the bodies are abandoned because the dead soldiers' comrades have been forced to escape their posts amidst the fighting. In such situations, returning to reclaim the dead isn't an option. An ambush from the other side may await, forcing a sad but necessary sacrifice. It's here where volunteer organizations like the Black Tulip come in. Crisis's video unveils some of the basics of the Black Tulip operation. The group is volunteer-led and Ukrainian in origin, but despite this origin, members of the Black Tulip take a surprisingly neutral approach to the task of body retrieval. They're just as likely to collect the corpses of Russian soldiers as they are of Ukrainian troops, and they treat each body they find with the same respect. The deceased soldier is identified as far as possible, with the Black Tulip then delicately bagging the soldier's remains, ready to transport away from the front lines. In many cases, the bodies are so decomposed that they cannot be identified by sight alone. For all of its efforts, the Black Tulip is not an instant response team. Instead, it says that it receives information from civilians and the Ukrainian military about where bodies can be found. With that information in hand, the volunteers risk life and limb to enter an active war zone to reclaim the body. Crisis's video showcases this as the camera crew follows Black Tulip members on a retrieval mission. Explosions are heard in the background and bullets fly just feet away, demonstrating just how dangerous this volunteer mission is. For the Black Tulip, the risk is justified to give the dead a dignified end. Crisis is not the only media outlet that's covered the Black Tulip's work. In February 2023, almost a year before Crisis published its video, the British online magazine The Spectator provided a first-hand account of what the Black Tulip does. Writing from Dovenka in Ukraine, Julius Strauss traveled alongside a man only known as Oleksiy, who he identifies as the leader of Black Tulip. During their travels, Oleksiy came across the body of a Russian soldier. The soldier's torso was still intact, with his flak jacket and plastic combat belt seeming to be perfectly preserved. But as the team's eyes lowered, they saw the soldier's legs. Splayed at an unnatural angle, the body likely displayed evidence that the soldier had been caught up in some sort of bomb blast. The soldier's head also told the story of a man who had simply been left to rot. Only a skull carrying dark stains remained, with no face or scalp present. The grim discovery also sheds light on the techniques the Black Tulip has to employ to remove such bodies safely. Strauss recounts Oleksiy delicately tying a rope around the body as he explains that Russia often goes as far as to booby-trap its own deceased before abandoning them. "We have to be careful," Oleksiy said as he tied the rope and walked around 150 feet away from the corpse with the other end of the rope in hand. Once a safe distance away up a muddy track, Oleksiy and the team crouched down and give the rope a pull. There was no explosion. Returning to the body, another volunteer named Dennis, aged just 21, picked up the skull that had detached from the body during the grim test, reuniting head with torso. The Spectator's article provides more insight into who the men of the Black Tulip really are. Strauss says that all 6 of the volunteers with whom he traveled for his report had previously been members of the same kickboxing team in Ukraine. They had also been hard at work for many months before. As they placed the dead Russian soldier's body and equipment in a white plastic body bag, neatly arranging all in a display of reverence for the dead, the small team explained that this unidentified soldier was the 299th body it had found. This was just 1 year into the Ukraine war. There have likely been many hundreds more soldiers retrieved by the Black Tulip in the year and a half since. Another member of the Black Tulip named Andrei, who was also just 21 at the time of the report, explained why his team does its gruesome work. "The job is very important. The guys who die protecting our country need to be able to go home to their mothers, fathers, daughters and sons. The group also revealed that though it worked to send brave Ukrainian soldiers home, it had become far more common for it to find Russian soldiers on Ukrainian ground. For every Ukrainian, the group found 2 dead Russians. Strauss revealed more of the group's process as it worked with the Russian soldier's corpse. Once the body had been arranged appropriately in the body bag, the group took photographs and catalogued its findings. From there, the Black Tulip explained, the body would be sent to the morgue so DNA samples could be collected. Those samples would be sent to the Russian authorities, along with any supporting documentation found on the body, as proof of identity. Those Russian authorities don't automatically accept that the discovered body is one of their own. The evidence sent is examined thoroughly on the Russian side, with the body only being added to a list of other retrieved Russian soldiers if those authorities accept the veracity of the submission. The dead soldier's name is added to a list. Eventually, Ukraine and Russia will organize a body swap to exchange their dead. We'll discuss the details of these swaps later in the video. Staying with the Black Tulip for now, Alexei explains that most of the families who learn of the relatives the organization has retrieved are happy to have the bodies back. They at least receive some form of closure and can finally properly mourn a fighter who made the ultimate sacrifice on the battlefield. But for some families, the news is too heartbreaking to bear. Occasionally, they simply refuse to accept what's happened, Alexei explained to The Spectator. If they're not claimed, then the bodies are buried in unmarked graves. Later in the report, Strauss explains the level of danger the Black Tulips face in every retrieval mission. Where the crisis video showed footage of the volunteer group's members crouching down as explosions and gunfire sounded off in the distance, the team Strauss accompanied faced a very different threat: mines. Both anti-tank and anti-personnel mines have formed a large part of Russia's strategy in the Ukraine war. Putin's troops have taken to sowing huge portions of Ukraine with these deadly weapons, with a particular focus on agricultural land, and they represent an ever-present threat to Ukrainian soldiers as they travel through their country. The Halo Trust estimates that there are up to 2 million landmines planted in Ukraine, with the organization having cleared only 19,000 of them. The entirety of Ukraine will need to be cleared if it's to be safe again. In his Spectator article, Strauss recalls walking along a narrow path lined on both sides with landmines while he accompanied the Black Tulip. The group is far from immune to Russian aggression, as the crisis video also explains. It's not uncommon for Russian soldiers to shoot at Black Tulip volunteers while they're trying to do their work in a bitter rubbing of salt into the wounds as the group tries to retrieve its country's dead. More bitterness comes in the tone of some of the Black Tulip volunteers when speaking about the Russian dead they retrieve. One member, named Vasily, made his feelings known about the Russian soldier with the splayed legs, even as he delicately worked to retrieve the body. "He is a stain and we need to remove him from our land," the 55-year-old told Strauss as his respectful actions contradicted the words that came out of his mouth. Perhaps for many in the Black Tulip, retrieving the Russian dead is less about showing respect to a fallen warrior and more about ensuring that the warrior is unable to leave any mark on the soil of the country they've invaded. Other body retrievals are even more gruesome than that of the Russian soldier with no face. Later in their trek, Strauss and the Black Tulip came across the burnt-out husk of an armored personnel carrier, or APC. The vehicle had been incinerated, the metal was burned to the point where it had deformed, and Alexei assumed the terrible task of exploring the APC for remains. He found a charred body. The group then spent an hour removing the body from the APC, though the work was far from simple. In the end, all that was left was a small metal tray of charred remains, a knife blade, parts of the soldier's flak jacket, a small piece of jawbone, and a boot the volunteers used to identify the fallen soldier as yet another Russian. All in a day's work for a Black Tulip volunteer. The Guardian, another UK-based news outlet, has also implanted one of its reporters with the Black Tulip. It published a report similar to The Spectator's in March 2023, only this time the bodies found were treated with at least a modicum of respect by the Russian soldiers who had abandoned them. The newspaper reported on a Black Tulip mission in the deserted village of Krasnopilya in the northern region of Donetsk. There, the Black Tulip found 2 Russian soldiers who had been carefully placed in the cellar of a broken building, likely by their comrades. The bodies were still abandoned, but in this case they were left wearing their summer uniforms. They'd also clearly been in the cellar for a long time. The bodies had decomposed to the extent that the soldiers could only be identified using the dog tags they still bore. The Guardian also reported on the anti-personnel mines the Black Tulip has to face. A volunteer named Arta explained that Russia has started to drop mines from rockets, with those mines often being blown around by the wind before they land. Arta had taken to using a drone to find the bodies on the battlefield, as well as to identify secure routes to them. The Guardian also notes that it isn't uncommon for the Black Tulip to face severe challenges while attempting to identify the bodies they retrieve. Many of the Russian soldiers in particular are burned before the group can get to them. Sometimes this burning is carried out by Ukrainian citizens, either through anger or for hygiene reasons. At other times, the Russian military will burn the bodies of the dead, likely to conceal the true scale of its war losses. More details about the Black Tulip emerge from the Guardian article. The group was just 10 members strong as of March 2023, making it a small blip when compared to the sheer scale of death seen in the Ukraine war so far. Its leader Alexei is also no stranger to the type of work the Black Tulip does. Before forming the group, he'd been a military enthusiast who spent much of his spare time digging up the skeletons of World War II soldiers left behind in Ukraine. He'd also worked in the no man's land that had formed between Ukraine and Russia in the wake of Russia's 2014 annexation of Crimea. Even the group's name highlights Alexei's interest in the military. The original Black Tulips were the planes the Soviet Union used to transport the remains of its soldiers who were killed in the Soviet-Afghan war that raged throughout the 1980s. We come to a question: what happens to the bodies of the dead once Black Tulip retrieves them? We've covered the early stages already. The bodies are sent to a morgue and identified, with the appropriate authorities being alerted to the retrieval. If the soldier is Ukrainian, the body is transported to the soldier's family so they can conduct their own funeral. Or, as Alexei explained earlier, the body is buried in an unmarked grave if the soldier's family is too grief-stricken to accept their loss. The fate of the Russian soldiers the Black Tulip and other organizations responsible for clearing bodies from the battlefield retrieve is far different. What happens to those corpses is an example of one of the very few forms of functioning diplomacy that now exists between Russia and Ukraine. They're taken to the bodies corridor. Every few months, Ukraine and Russia will arrange an exchange of their dead. The UK's Daily Telegraph reported on such an exchange, speaking of a convoy snaking through the Sumy region of Ukraine in February 2024. That convoy was led by a police car and followed by both a unit of forensic officials and a refrigerated van used to transport the bodies of several dozen Russian soldiers. A similar delegation would have been traveling through Russia, with both convoys set to meet just past the border. Border roads are demined to allow the convoy's safe passage, with Russia also having snipers in trees overlooking the coming exchange. As a small mercy, the shelling of the regions through which the convoys travel is ceased, in respect to the grim task that lies ahead. The Daily Telegraph reports that the Ukrainian convoy crosses over the border into Russian territory during these exchanges. To the outsider, this may seem like a cruel condition placed on the Ukrainian convoy by Putin. That isn't the case. As a Ukrainian military intelligence official named Vitaly Matvienko explained to the news outlet, "We go to their side because we don't want Russian vehicles in our territory. It's a risk, of course, but it's a lower risk than if they came here." Even when exchanging the bodies of the dead, Ukraine has to be very wary of Russian infiltration and aggression. Once the convoys meet, an exchange of bodies takes place, with the tense process taking just under an hour. Spot checks are carried out by the Red Cross to confirm those being exchanged are who each side claims them to be. This is just one example of many such exchanges, with the Daily Telegraph noting that Ukraine had retrieved the bodies of 2,495 of its soldiers during these solemn treks along the bodies corridor. Another example comes from August 2024. That month saw the largest exchange via the bodies corridor, with Ukraine reporting that it had successfully retrieved 250 of its dead soldiers from Russia. For its part, Ukraine handed over just 38 Russian soldiers. Perhaps some of those bodies had been recovered by the Black Tulip in the months prior. Interestingly, the CBS report covering this exchange noted that Russia appears to hold on to the Ukrainian dead it reclaims for far longer than Ukraine holds on to Russian soldiers. Some of the 250 Ukrainians delivered back to their country were soldiers who had fought in Mariupol, which is one of the first cities that Russia attacked after its initial invasion failed. That city fell in May 2022, meaning some of the Ukrainian soldiers had been in Russian hands for over 2 years before they were finally sent home. Given the sheer scale of the deaths occurring in the Ukraine war, it's clear that organizations like Black Tulip aren't the only ones retrieving the bodies of soldiers. Indeed, the Royal United Services Institute, or RUSI, explains that Ukraine's authorities set up official channels through which this sad work can be completed as early as September 2022. It says Ukraine works alongside several parties, including the International Commission on Missing Persons and the International Criminal Court, to find and identify the bodies of the dead. The International Committee of the Red Cross, or ICRC, also plays a substantial role, as seen from the fact that it's members of the ICRC that are often chosen to oversee the exchanges that occur in the bodies corridor. RUSI also provides more insight into what is supposed to happen to those killed on the battlefield during war. It cites the Geneva Convention, created in 1906, as stating that combatant states have a duty to bury or cremate the body of those killed on the battlefield. Those warring states must also make every effort to collect the dead's possessions so they can be sent back home. These measures are in place to preserve the dignity of the dead, but they become extremely difficult to follow when deaths occur en masse, as they are in the Ukraine war. Russia alone has been losing around 1,000 soldiers per day for much of the latter half of 2024, with the retrieval of those bodies being a low priority for Ukraine. It's too busy fighting to defend itself against Russia's aggression to dedicate much time to following this particular aspect of the Geneva Convention. The Ukrainian armed forces are still trying to do their part, as evidenced by their work alongside so many international organizations. But groups like Black Tulip exist because Ukraine simply doesn't have the military resources it needs to reclaim so many dead whilst it's still fighting. It also isn't helped by the fact that almost all of the fighting, barring that taking place in Kursk following Ukraine's August 2024 incursion into Russian territory, is taking place in Ukraine. The responsibility for collection largely falls on Ukrainian shoulders. Which brings us to another question. Just what is Russia doing with the dead soldiers it encounters? It's difficult to determine what official processes Russia has in place or if there are any volunteer organizations emulating the Black Tulip's work on the Russian side. There's clearly some sort of retrieval process in place. If there wasn't, Russia wouldn't have Ukrainian soldiers to deliver in the bodies corridor. But as we move closer to the 3-year mark of the Ukraine war, evidence is mounting that Russia often treats the dead with far less respect than Ukraine. Abandonment is common, which is why the Black Tulip typically finds more Russian soldiers than Ukrainian dead in its searches. These abandonments were reported as early as May 2022, just 3 months into the war. After Russia failed to take Kyiv during its initial invasion, it withdrew behind the border and began to launch more sustained assaults on Ukrainian territory. With Kyiv safe in the sense that it no longer faced invading ground forces, citizens regularly reported finding the bodies of Russian soldiers on the city's outskirts. According to the BBC, Russia showed little interest in retrieving those bodies in the immediate aftermath of its failed attempt to take Kyiv. When the BBC visited the groups responsible for collecting those bodies inside Ukraine, it said that there were at least 137 stacked within a pair of carriages during the single day when its reporters were present. Putin's discarded soldiers. It's unknown how many, if any, of those dead Russian troops made it back home. Part of the reason why Russia has been less intent on collecting the bodies of its dead is that Putin may be trying to hide the sheer scale of the country's war losses. Back in June 2022, Russia claimed that it had lost just 1,300 of its soldiers in around 5 months of fighting. NPR reported that this seemed to be a serious undercount, with the likelihood being that the losses were in the tens of thousands. Fast forward 2 years, and Russia is losing close to that number every single day, yet it's still abandoning the bodies of its fallen. If nothing else, Russia's actions have put paid to the notion that its military doesn't leave a man behind. As Colonel Volodymyr Lyamzin, who heads Ukraine's Central Department of Civil Military Cooperation of the General Staff of the Armed Forces, put it in June 2022, if that was true, why are all these bodies here? It's also clear that Russia isn't following the Geneva Convention when it does try to reclaim and bury dead soldiers. The same Guardian article that reported the Black Tulip's work also notes that the bodies of thousands of dead Russian soldiers are being informally disposed of through burning and mass burials, with the Kremlin reporting the soldiers as missing in action rather than deceased. Again, evidence mounts of Putin attempting to hide the true scale of Russia's losses. Evidence of these convention-breaking methods comes from intercepted calls made by Russian soldiers in May 2024. One soldier claimed that the bodies of his comrades, along with many others, were simply being buried in a dump the height of a man, with the soldier later claiming the corpses were stacked over 6 feet high. "They just tossed them in there," said another Russian soldier in a different intercepted call. "And then later, it's easier to just make it as if they disappear without a trace. It's easier for them to pretend that they're just missing, and that's it." The creation of those mass graves has been part of Russia's corpse disposal methods since at least April 2022, as shown when Ukraine discovered such a grave in Bucha. In this case, it appears Russia had buried the bodies of Ukrainian soldiers, leaving those in Bucha to search through the remains to find family members and loved ones among the dead. The great irony for Ukraine is that for all its efforts to reclaim the dead on both sides, the war will eventually end, with its land being pockmarked with the mass graves of the very invaders against which it's fighting. What's clear is that Russia is doing far less to respect the Geneva Conventions than Ukraine. Its soldiers are actively shooting at the Black Tulip volunteers attempting to reclaim the dead, with Putin's disposal orders also showing a complete lack of respect for Ukraine's soldiers and his own. So why does Black Tulip continue to do the work that it does? The retrieval of the Ukrainian fighters who make the ultimate sacrifice for their country is the primary motivator for the group. However, there are those in the Black Tulip that do their work for a higher purpose. In the crisis video, one of the volunteers says that his work makes a big difference to the families who are finally able to welcome their fallen loved ones back home. The group's leader, Alexei, says that the work has an even greater meaning for him. He believes that there's life after death, with the retrieval of fallen soldiers across Ukraine perhaps being part of the process he feels needs to be undertaken for those who have died to experience the afterlife. One thing is certain: the work of organizations like the Black Tulip will go on throughout the war and long after it's ended. It may only be when this work is completed, likely many years after the Ukraine war ends, that we truly discover the human cost of Putin's invasion. With that, we'd like to know what you think about the Black Tulip's work and how important it is in the wider context of the war. Could Ukraine be doing more to support these brave volunteers? How can Russia be held to account for so often breaking the Geneva Convention to bury the dead in mass graves? Share your thoughts in the comments, and thank you for watching the video.